Hello and welcome to my cargo bike channel. If your spring is anything like mine, one day it's sunny and 70 and the next it's pouring rain. If you ride a cargo bike, this means you're constantly putting the rain flap on and taking it off and on and off and on and off for months. An excuse I have used many times to say, never mind, I do not have time to deal with the rain flap, I will just take the car instead. On top of that, it's impossible to find a good place to store the rain flap when you're not using it. I'm just not going to remove the poles and fold it up nice and neat and put it back in its bag every time I take it off the bicycle. If you just toss it in the corner, it gets dirty and damaged. I've been storing mine using these two chairs for the last couple months, but obviously that's not ideal. These plastic windows still manage to get creases in them that do not come out. So all that led to me building a new rack in my garage to store the rain flap neatly and make installation and removal way easier and faster. So if you're curious, I'm going to show you exactly how I made it. First, make sure you have a space large enough to fit this rain flap. It's big. You need an area that's about 5 feet long by 4 feet high and 2.5 feet deep. At first, I thought about hanging the flap from the hooks on top, but ultimately didn't have confidence in the seams to support all that weight for the long term. Let me know in the comments if you try that and if it works. Ultimately, I wanted to store the flap in a similar way that it attaches to the bike. So the poles support the weight, and it's hopefully pulling at the flap in a similar way that the bike naturally does. So here's what you're going to need to build the rack. Several pieces of 2x4 wood, a miter saw, handsaw, and a jigsaw, depending on how detailed you want to be, a sander, tape measure, a drill with screws, two specific drill bits. I used a 5/16 drill bit and an 11/32 drill bit. You'll need a protractor or a speed square, something that shows you degrees, has an angle on it, and a stud finder. I had some scrap 2x4 pieces laying around, so I decided to use those. I started by drilling 2 holes that were of a similar size to what you would find in the Urban Arrow frame. There are 2 sections to a hole. Each section has a different diameter. So I used the 5/16 inch drill bit to drill the hole all the way through the wood, and then I used the 11/32 drill bit to drill probably just like a 1/2 inch into the wood. And this 1/2 inch acts as a stopper to the pole so that it won't go all the way through. I wasn't really paying attention the first time, and I just drilled the hole straight down with no angle. It quickly became apparent that this would put the rain flap at too high of an angle, and it was going to hit the garage door tracks that are above where I want to store the rain flap. I drilled a second set of holes, just eyeballing the angle, and still didn't get it quite right, but it was close enough that I could still test other aspects of the rack. I did eventually measure the actual angle of the holes, but I'll get to that later. Side note, if at this point you want to skip all this nonsense, I did discover that a children's stroller is a great place to store the rain flap. It has all the right angles. What am I doing with my life? I cut the wood down so that the rain flap could hang down the sides of it, and attached a second smaller piece of wood under it to elevate the flap off the brace that I would make to attach it to the wall. Then I just cut 45-degree angles in another piece of wood to make the wall brace. Screwing it all together in a triangle, and it's ready to hang on the wall. Will it work? No idea. Next, get out the stud finder, because this thing absolutely has to be installed in a stud. At first, I put it even with that blue shelf, but that turned out to be comically high. I could barely even get the poles into the holes, and it was way too close to that garage door track. So I moved the whole thing a good 6 inches lower, which was better, but still not ideal. But it did let me get an idea of exactly how this rack would work, and I really didn't like how the 2x4 caused this crease in the front of the flap. I may have been getting too picky at this point, but I don't like to half-ass things. So it's time for the next revision. I got a new piece of 2x4 and tried to recreate the front of the Urban Arrow by tracing it with a pin. This is when I got out my jigsaw to cut out the irregular shapes, and then I used a sander to sand down the edges and make sure there was nothing pointy or sharp. I used a pencil to mark where to drill the holes, and I finally measured the holes at 15 degrees from the vertical. Used my speed square to roughly drill the holes at that 15-degree angle. Again, I used the 2 different size drill bits for each hole to create that stopper for the poles. There was a lot of fine tuning around the little nubs that stick out the front. At first they pulled the rain flap way too tight, and so I made them a little narrower, a little more narrower, and a little more narrower, and even then cut off the bottoms of the nubs to try to loosen things up a little bit. Eventually I got to this, which I was like, good enough, I think it will work. I took off that old design and attached this new one. I also moved the whole rack a couple inches even lower, and it's way easier to get the poles in now. The angle of the poles is better, and when I pull the flap around those nubs, it brings the back of the flap even lower. So there's plenty of space between the flap and the garage door tracks. I like it. It's not the prettiest thing I've ever built, but it does what it's supposed to do, and it's sturdy. I was worried I'd have to add some extra bracing because of the awkward torque the poles exert on the rack, but so far so good. Here are a couple pictures showing the final dimensions of the rack. Now, instead of tossing the rack in a pile or dealing with annoying folds or creases, I can just grab it, throw it on my bike, and ride. No hassle. This little setup has saved me so much time this spring. If you're looking for one less hurdle to riding when it's cold or rainy, try making one of these for your own garage. Let me know in the comments how it goes or how you store your own cargo bike gear. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more cargo bike content. Thanks for watching.
You want to splash in that puddle?
I do.
Whew. Well,
I'm flying when I don't want to make it.